sure where to stay. Good evening.
Yeah, this is on. Hi, my name is Daniel Kellogg. I teach composition at the College of Music, and we are so proud to present this exquisite artist, Pamala Z, who is an alum from the College of Music. I believe spent a portion of her childhood, or all of her childhood, in Colorado. Just incredible vocalist, composer, media artist, somebody that pioneered looping way back when the technology was completely different. Just a really unique individual that creates some very compelling music and art. And we were honored to give her the Distinguished Alumni Award in 2008, and I'm just so proud that somebody came from this school and then went off and did such amazing things. There's going to be a short talk back or Q&A at the very end, so if you have a couple of questions, that would be wonderful. So let's get started. Please welcome Pamala Z.
The marks left on pavement by spent emergency flares are like injured stick figures. Like spilled wooden matches, like broken swastikas are doves' footprints. Dear pen pal, my computer is broken. I'm sorry it's taken me so long to write, but as you can see, I'm not very good at this. And sometimes I have to backspace over words and type X's through them because I don't have any white out. I hope I get my Mac back soon. Until then, you probably won't hear from me too often. Love. Pamala Z at typewriter.com. I would like to think.
So, I thought this would be a good time to mention that,
in case some of you are program readers, some people read programs, some people don't. But if you are program readers, you may have noticed, or you may not have, that the pieces that I have listed in the program for tonight are not all happening in the order that they're listed, and some of them are not happening at all, and some of them are being replaced with other pieces. So I just wanted to give you, confirmation in case you were confused about that. So I had a few kind of newer pieces that were on the program, some of which I had to cancel for reasons I won't go into. But for those who were just not reading the program, and really, even if you had, wouldn't have known how to identify what was what anyway, carry on. Ga. 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 Ga.
At this point, I would like to invite my guest musicians to come and join me. I have two wonderful players who have agreed to help me out with this next piece. I actually, usually when I perform a program of music, a solo performance of music, it's usually all works that I've written. But tonight, I thought it'd be fun to include some cover tunes on the bill. And so this one is one that was commissioned by, my arrangement of it was commissioned by an organization in San Francisco that's called Undercover. And so we got this here. Yeah, there we go. See if we can do it without that much reverb. Okay. Sorry about that.
Okay, so this was commissioned by this organization called Undercover. And what they do is they produce these concerts where they will select an iconic album and then they'll ask several musicians, soloists or groups, to each make a cover of one of the tracks on the record. And then the concert will be the entire album in order with all these people playing their interpretations of it. So a couple of years ago, they did a version of Bjork's Homogenic. And this is the track that they requested that I make an arrangement for. So, and I've had these two lovely people who agreed to help me out with this because the arrangement that I made included string players, and so I needed, in order to do it here, I had to find some string players here, and here they are. So this is my my rendition.
relax unexpectedly late. These things happen with computers.
All right. And we're in business again. I'm breathing. I was breathing. I was breathing. I was breathing, was breathing, was breathing, was breathing. I I This is a section from a piece I made a few years ago called Memory Trace. I remember trying to learn to swim.
right, so I'm just going to finish with one last song, and it's actually another cover tune. A few years back, I don't know, it's been many years now, maybe 5 or 6, but Meredith Monk created a double CD called Monk Mix. She worked with DJ Spooky, that subliminal kid, who, if any of you were here last night for the concert, he was actually here, which was nice to see him. I hadn't seen him in a while. But he helped Meredith out by producing this record that was sort of a tribute to her, where she commissioned 25 composers, composer-performers, to either do remixes or reinterpretations of her songs. And we were allowed to choose from any song throughout her career. They had sent several titles to choose from, and when I got the list, I was very sad that I didn't see my favorite Meredith Monk song in the list. So I called them and I said, would it be all right if I do Scared Song? And they said, oh, of course, we didn't think to include that. And so I ended up making an interpretation of Scared Song. Some of the pieces on the record were remixes in the true like remix culture sense, where they used samples from her work and built other things out of it. And some of them were just reinterpretations where people made arrangements. So I created an arrangement where I replaced, in her original arrangement, it was just her voice, an organ, and a piano. So I replaced the organ and piano sounds with layers and loops of my own voice. And I did all of this in the studio in Pro Tools, and so I meticulously constructed this arrangement with all these little bits and pieces of my voice, and then sang the melody over the top of that. And just in the spirit of the remix culture that the record was about, I decided to at least use one sample. So I did a small sample of part of the piano, a little bit of the piano from Meredith's piece, and I include that just here and there in the arrangement. Anyway, the upshot of all of this is that after the record came out, they said, oh, we're going to have a CD release party in New York, and we'd like you to come and perform your track. And I said, oh, because I actually had never thought about performing it live, and I had created it completely in the studio, and so it took some finagling, but I figured out a way using my sort of typical live looping techniques to make a live version. And I was, you know, my live version is kind of pretty close to what my Pro Tools version sounds like. So let's see how well I can remember it and do it for you tonight. So this is Scared Song by Meredith Monk, and that's all finished with.
Thank you for being here. Pamela, are you exhausted or are you up for a couple of questions?
Sure, we can do some questions.
Okay, are you all interested? So if we could please vote or before we're back. Other questions for Pamela Z? Yes, in front row.
What was the second song that you played?
The second thing I played was called Flare Stains, and it's kind of a poem that I came up with when I was walking down the street in San Francisco, and I looked down at the pavement when I was crossing the street and saw these sort of wax, and charred residue from flare stains that there must have been an accident the night before. And I just started thinking of all of these descriptors in my mind to describe like what those forms on the street looked like to me. And when I got home, I sort of liked the language that was in my head from that, so I wrote it all down and made that song. So that's what that was. And it's not in the program. I had there's a couple of things that are in the program that I wasn't able to do tonight because of problems with the projector actually that we had earlier. So I substituted in some other pieces for those. So that was one of them. There was something else I did tonight. Oh, I did also the piece that was called 16 Actions, and it's the one where I'm triggering all those little images of myself on the screen. That one I sort of inserted in too because I wanted to put something in to pull the place of the two things which I didn't do, two or three things. I didn't do something from Memory Trace. It's called Memory Palace. And I wasn't able to do that one. And I also have a new piece called Other Rooms, which I'm actually in the process of. It would have been work in progress. I'm in the process of making it to perform at the Other Minds Festival this year. But so those were the things I substituted in.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
I'm curious how you developed your controllers, and along with that, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the precise movements that you're doing and how they trigger control.
Okay, so the controllers, I actually started using gesture controllers back in the early 90s. I started with this instrument that was called the body synth, which is kind of a misnomer for that instrument because it was not a synthesizer, it was a MIDI controller, but it used sensors, and the sensors that it used were electrode sensors that measure the electricity coming off of the muscles. So you play it by actually making effort with muscles, and the more effort you made, the bigger numbers you could get, and then translate that into MIDI messages. So I used that for many years, and that was actually built by these two guys, Ed Severinghouse and Chris Van Raalte. Chris was a dancer, and Ed was more of a sort of a programmer geek type. And so they wanted to make an instrument that Chris could use to make the music that he was dancing to by dancing. And so that's how that instrument came about. I used it for many years. It was my only on-stage MIDI controller for many years. And then I have this very dear friend, collaborator named Donald Swearingen, who lives in San Francisco as well. He's also a composer-performer, but he's also like a really brilliant kind of an inventor. And he was making all kinds of sensor-based instruments for his own performance. And he made me something as a gift, which was this little ultrasound.
This little guy. And you guys can hear me, right? I don't actually
Yeah.
probably need to do this. unless it's like they need it for trying to record this on the board or something. But anyway, so that little one is an ultrasound controller. The whole key to all of these controllers is they just use sensor technology. And so there are different types of sensors in all of them. And a lot of it's medical equipment, or it always comes from some other application, and then we kind of co-opt it for our work. But so that one has ultrasound in it, just like what they have in the hospitals. Basically, exactly what they would use if it's looking for mass, essentially. So it's what they would use to find your fetus or your tumor or whatever it is that you have when you go to the hospital. And so it works by actually emitting sound. It emits a very, very low frequency clicking sound. And it's the exact same thing that bats do when they use echolocation. And so if I put my hands there on either side of it, I have like 2 channels of it that I can play with. And so each side is spitting out ultrasound, and also has a little receiver to listen for ultrasound. So when I put my hand there, it depends on the size and closeness of my hand. And so that's why I play it by opening and closing my hand, or get moving further away from it, so that I can sort of give it little fine differences in numbers that I'm trying to send. The long one, this one, uses infrared. And so it's kind of the same idea. It has 4 little sensors on it that point upwards, and one side of each sensor sends out IR, and the other side of that same sensor looks for IR. So then it knows the distance of my hands from it that way. And then I have several others. I used one other tonight, the ones I was wearing on my hands. Those ones use accelerometer and gyro. So it's essentially like strapping your iPhone to your hand. And those came about, so I think part of your question was, how did these come about? So Donald built this one for me as a gift, and then he had made himself a sensor like this, like a controller like this, but it was using visible light spectrum. And so he would play it by either depriving it of light or shining light on it. You could calibrate it to go one way or the other. And so I borrowed that from him and was using that one for a while. And there were problems, because then I'm working with a lighting designer, I'm working in different places, and you have to calibrate them, and it's visible light spectrum. So every time you thought you had it all perfect, then the lighting designer says, I'll go for another look now, and then suddenly everything doesn't work. And so I had him make me another one using infrared. And then the infrared seems to not get interfered with very much, because we usually aren't sending infrared from anything. There was one house I worked in, I think it was Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, when I did memory trace, actually. And during the tech for that, this thing started going nuts. So I think some of these new lighting instruments maybe have some IR spectrum in them, I don't know. But I had to get into Max and calibrate some numbers because it was losing its mind. And then the ones that I wear, those came about because after I started using this one, I got kind of lazy and stopped using the body synth. And I woke up one day and realized I wasn't even bothering to bring the body synth anymore, because I was sort of enjoying the simplicity of using this one. But I started, after a couple of years of not using the body synth, I started to miss having something wearable that I could just walk around independently and not have to relate to some physical object in order to trigger the sounds, So I said to my friend, let's design some wearable thing, something I could put on my hand. And I said, do you have a source of, gyro and accelerometer sensors, the kinds of sensors like what are in your phone? And so we kind of worked on it together. And of course, he's the one who knows how to install these little, he actually makes boards and solders them together. In the case of those ones, he bought those little boards and the sensor. But the sensor that's on that one is kind of great, because it has 3 sensors in it. It has gyro, it has gyro, it has accelerometer, and it has electromagnetic, magnetometer. And so what that means is I can actually have 9 sort of parameters that I could program at any given time with both of them, because you have the X, Y, and Z for the accelerometer, the X, Y, and Z for the gyro, and the X, Y, Z for the magnetometer. But right now I'm only using the accelerometer and gyro, because the magnetic one, it can work just on the Earth's magnetic field. But it's a little difficult to get precise with it and figure out what it's doing. And so we're working on something right now where I took a magnet, like a little magnet the size of a coin cell battery, and sewed it inside of an elastic band, and I had that on one arm, and then I was working with like passing it by that. And that seems like that is a promising avenue, but we haven't perfected that yet. So, but anyway, so those are, I don't remember all of what your question was, but that's some information about the sensors and about the gesture controllers. Yeah?
Have you ever worked with a theremin in your pieces?
I've never had a theremin. I have friends who have theremins, and I've never had one, but people often ask me if they always think this is one, because they see me playing it. It has two sides to it, and it's like you play without touching it. People think it's a theremin, which I think is really funny, because a theremin, I mean, I don't know how many people in the room know, but a theremin is actually a synthesizer. And so as such, it has its own voice. It not only has the sensors that know where your hands are, but it generates the sound. And it really only has one voice, which is sort of like a musical song. It's kind of, that's sort of the sound of a theremin. So when you hear that, that's the telltale. But I always thought it would be really, and so the difference between that and these instruments is that these are MIDI controllers. So with this, I can trigger any sound that I want to, like if I make a bank of samples and put them on my hard drive, I can trigger those sounds. Or as you saw, I can also use it to change the processing on my voice, or I could even use it to change the lighting in the room or something, or control the video. So, because it's basically spitting out numbers, and then I can tell the computer to interpret those numbers however I want. So I use it differently in each piece. But I always thought it would be really funny to sample a theremin sound. And then, it's just to satisfy all those people who want that to be a theremin. Yeah, so. Any other questions?
Well,
Yeah?
okay, so how are you triggering the different clusters of video?
Oh, okay. That I am using a sensor that you all have. I am just using the camera on the laptop to do that. And so I'm doing all my video. Some of you, I know there's a mixture in the room of people who are tech savvy to varying degrees. How many people know what max MSP is? Okay, that's a really big number for that's a big percentage in an audience to say yes to that question. But okay, so then if you know what max MSP is, that it comes with, you used to have to buy it separately, but now it comes with another program called Jitter. And so a lot of people who use Max also use Jitter for video. I, on the other hand, when I first started doing video, trying to do live interactive video things, I worked with Jitter a little bit. But I found that for me, Jitter was just not user-friendly enough. And I was constantly on the phone to Luc Dubois going, Luc, please help me, I can't figure out how to make my patch do what I'm trying to do. And so finally I thought, I gotta figure something out. And then I took a workshop in software called Isadora. Anybody know Isadora? Some of you, not as many, but so Isadora is a live video, interactive video, performance video software. And it's made by this guy named Mark Cornelio, who had a dance company, and he and his wife used to like to do all these interactive things, and they could never find the tools to do it. So he also had this computer brain, so he decided he would write the software himself. Thus the name Isadora, so it's named after Isadora Duncan. But that software, I'm pretty sure that almost anything that you could do in Isadora, you could do in Jitter and vice versa, but it's just a matter of knowing how. And Isadora is just written to be super, super user-friendly. So I found I took one workshop, and after that, I'm pretty much able to just create the patches I need and get it to do the things I want to do. Once in a while, I have to solicit help from somebody who knows it better than I do. But for the most part, I get a lot of mileage out of using Isadora. So I've been using Isadora for quite some time. I also, you'll notice I use it on a separate computer because, for a lot of reasons. For one thing, if it was Jitter and I was using Macs, I would probably use them both on the same machine. But since it's a separate software and I'm also asking a lot of it, if it were to go down, if one of those computers goes down, it would take the other one down with it if I was doing it all on the same machine. So I just, keep them separate that way. And then I sometimes have to figure out ways to get them to communicate. But I think the original question was, how was I making that happen? So basically, I was using the camera on the computer. I have done things like that with an actual special, external camera that I placed somewhere on stage. But in this case, I was just being super easy about it, and just the camera that's built right into the computer using it. And then in Isadora, I built a patch based on something that Mark had already made that has, movement recognition. So then in the camera, it sees my movement. So then I can catch the clip, and it goes into a buffer. And then by gesturing in various areas that I've cropped the camera to look at, I can then activate those different things. So, and somebody else started to raise their hand.
Maybe last question so we can.
I was just curious, in that patch, then did you rewrite all the buffers at the end?
Oh,
they
yeah.
all start synchronizing.
Yeah, what I do is I have them all mapped to keys on the keyboard. And so when I first, I trigger them one at a time doing different things. And then at the end of the piece, I just go back through and I just do this one motion, and I just trigger them all again while I'm just doing this one motion. So it's just, it's kind of like playing it like it's an instrument, So, yeah. As a matter of fact, there's a couple of times in the piece that I trigger them again, but in the end, I trigger them to get them all in sync with me just doing that. I guess we're out of time.
Thank you very, very much. Thanks for coming. Yeah, you can use it to show us.
I enjoyed doing this.
Yeah. He lives in the sometimes. Yeah, he was teaching